Governor Gavin Newsom is facing a recall. We don't know the exact date, but it will happen in 2021, this year. That has been already announced by Secretary of State Shirley Weber. And this is something that Republicans put on the ballot. Well, it will be probably the only thing on the ballot. And it comes about due to signatures. California is one of 19 states where you can recall the governor just by getting enough signatures. It doesn't have to be a reason. It can just be that you don't like that person and you are tenacious enough to get a lot of signatures of voters that agree with you. There is a formula. You have to get 12% of the voters in the last election for office. It has to include voters from at least 5 counties. Republican recall proponents did that, and they have submitted those signatures, over 1.6 million to be exact. The date of the election depends on them getting through all these different steps that they have to get through to finally and fully approve that recall. The voters on the ballot will be asked 2 questions. Do they want to recall Gavin Newsom, meaning fire him? Yes or no? If more than 50% of voters say yes, they want to get rid of him, the second question on the ballot is who should replace him. And this is what I really don't like about recall elections. If 50% of voters say that Newsom is fired, then whoever gets the most votes becomes governor. Everybody and their mama can run. There is no limit on the number of candidates who can run on an official recall ballot. Whoever gets the most votes wins, and you don't need a majority. So in other words, when Arnold Schwarzenegger ran against Gray Davis, last time we had a disastrous big waste of money recall in this state, obviously Gray Davis was recalled. 55% of voters said they didn't want him anymore. More than 100 people ran to replace him. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, got 48.6% of the vote. Normally you would need a runoff election, but not in a recall. By some weird twist of rules, you don't need a majority. So whoever gets the most votes would win. Underrepresented and marginalized communities. I'm talking about Jasmyne Cannick. Good morning, Jasmine.
Hey, Dominique. Good morning. Good morning, Front Page family.
Good to hear from you. You are passionate about many topics, and I wish we had time in 2020, correct?
It looks 2021, but yes, it looks like it will.
Yeah, 2021, right? Everything happened in 2020. Everything bad, just put it in 2020. 2021 is what I mean. The only possible way it wouldn't happen, I guess there's a step where people can change their minds about their signatures, but the hundreds of thousands of people changing their minds, highly unlikely.
Yeah, that is highly unlikely. I mean, and I I know there's a bill or something working its way up in Sacramento also, so that in the future, when people sign that what are they trying to do? They're trying to do something that I don't agree with, but it's similar to what you're saying, where people can take their name off of a petition that they signed. But yeah, Dominique, I mean, in addition to all the things you said, I'm also an elected member of the Democratic Party at the state level and the local level. So this is a big deal. We just had our state convention. This was the topic of the convention. Folks were basically given their marching orders, which was, at all costs, protect our man, which is Gavin Newsom. You and I talked about it. I just really thought, what's in it for black folks? I know that we're being told by other black people in the Democratic Party, who we like to to support Gavin Newsom, but has an agenda been put out there? Have we taken advantage of the fact that this is a man who is clearly in hot water? And I'm looking at other communities who are not so willingly just giving their support, but saying, "Hey, we want this or we want that." Like, what commitments are?
So articulate what those communities are. I see that the Latinx leaders, we saw what you're referring to is Black Democrats holding a press conference and saying we support Governor Newsom, and that included Congresswoman Bass and others. I see that Latinx leaders did the same. So who is holding out? Who is doing what you're saying, which is, hey, what's in this for us? Which is pretty much how politics works most of the time.
It sure does. That really is how it works, right? One hand washes the other, right? But when I talk about other communities, I talk about the LGBTQ plus community. I'm talking about other races, just other communities that have vested interests. We just haven't even had that conversation in our community. I remember just going from A to Z, basically, from 0 to 10. It was like there were murmurs in our community, and then we were basically being told what to do. And I'm not saying, not to support Gavin Newsom. I think that as, Black people in this state, the few of us who are left here who can afford to still live here, we would not fare well under a Republican regime. I think of, for example, the financial assistance, right, that has been provided during the pandemic, right, for people who were not eligible for unemployment, and even people who were eligible for unemployment, right, that additional boost that came from the state. I think of things like that, and I think, okay, well, if a Republican gets into office, you can kiss pretty much all of that goodbye.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Dominique, I'm like, okay, but we still should have a list of demands. We still should be asking for something. And, Gavin Newsom saying that, if U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein were to step down, that he would, now appoint a Black person to replace her, is not the answer. That's just not
well,
the
right,
answer,
because
right?
she's already indicated that she won't step down. She has said that, and we went through this with the whole keep the seat fight where we did ask for a Black woman to be appointed, and nothing against Alex Padilla. I think he's a great lawmaker, but we wanted Kamala Harris, who's a Black woman, to be replaced with a Black woman, and we didn't get what we wanted. He did appoint Shirley Weber, but that was a switcheroo because that's not what we asked. I love Dr. Weber, glad she's Secretary of State, but that's not the same as sending someone on the national stage to the Senate when we have no Black women in the Senate. So that's understood, and that's understood to be, something he said to placate us in a sense. But
and it worked.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess
people who did not understand that Senator Feinstein had said last December she had no plans on resigning,
which is amazing
or stepping
because
down early.
Which is another conversation for another day. But it is amazing. Like, how long are you going to stay in office? I think she was
okay, but if you talk
politician
about Feinstein,
when I was in high school.
You got to talk about all our friends then, okay? So
no, because all our friends are not.
That's a hard conversation.
I don't think it's that hard.
That's a hard one.
I don't think it is. But anyway, let's try to stay focused here. So, but it is more complicated than this too, because of the way that recall elections are set up, which I was talking about before the break. You have two questions on a recall election. Do you want to recall the governor, aka fire him? And who should replace him? And if he gets voted out, the highest vote getter automatically gets to be governor. That is crazy. Even if you didn't separate them, Ed Sanders was saying, no, we shouldn't separate them because then it'll turn into a whole campaign. I don't have a problem with that. But even if you don't separate them, we should at least have a runoff. If nobody gets 50%, Mickey Mouse can win with 12% of the vote if enough candidates show up in this election. So Democrats have to decide, and black people have to decide, not just do we support a recall, but do we put a candidate, an alternate Democrat in the race in case Gavin Newsom loses. And that's the thing we did not do with Gray Davis. The Democratic Party said we're going to unite behind Davis and don't anybody run, and nobody did. And we ended up with Schwarzenegger because there was no alternative candidate. What is your take on whether or not Democrats should run a candidate in case Newsom loses?
So I have a whole list of people I would like to see run. And, Dominique, I've never been to go along to get along status quo.
Right. I mean, and you and I, we agree on a few things, but we disagree on a lot of things, too. I would say you definitely are more
you're too
conservative.
Liberal for me, girl.
Right. You definitely run to the right-wing side of me. That's all good. But the question is, okay, so you have a long list, but you also need someone viable. I mean, not to say you're not viable. You could be governor. I'd be down with
viable. All the people I have are viable.
Viable meaning out of that long list of Republican candidates, they can come out on top. That's what I mean by viable.
For sure. The problem is what you said. The Democratic Party has decided that, once again, we're all going to unite behind our man. Even though, quite frankly, our man ain't always been there for us. But that's, And so we really need to think about that. Now, I know there are Democrats that are considering running right now who are thinking about it. I know there are people who are being talked down from running. So we'll see what happens. I mean, quite frankly, yes, the scenario could be we end up with Governor Jenner, right?
That's highly unlikely. You think that... Caitlyn Jenner is no Arnold Schwarzenegger. Governor Kardashian, are you kidding me?
Okay, so here's the thing.
I'll take Kim over Caitlyn, by the way.
Caitlyn Jenner. You'll take who?
I'll take Kim over Caitlyn.
You take Kim?
Kim Kardashian over Caitlyn Jenner. If I have to pick a Kardashian for governor, I'll take Kim over Caitlyn any day.
No, I would take... I wouldn't be Kim.
Well, look, I'm not advocating that. I'm saying if those are my only options. But anyway, the point is, you were saying you think that Jenner has a chance?
Absolutely. I mean...
Oh, Lord. Let's pray
if you
right now.
If you get over everything else, she's exactly who and what the Republican Party here in California, stands for. I think that, again, we always have to remember...
Inexperienced, shallow, and totally...
happened, but that doesn't match her
disconnected from the day-to-day life of regular people. Oh.
And also killed somebody in her car. Okay?
Well, that part...
And when I went to her campaign website, the first picture she had on her website was her with her dog in a convertible, and she wasn't even looking at the road. She was looking at her dog. And I was like, oh, my God, who is her political consultant? But that's a whole nother story. But my point is just that when it comes to elections, voters don't vote for the person who has the most experience. They vote for the person that they like, the person who kissed the most babies, who... resonated the most with folks.
Well, that may be true. It didn't turn out that way this presidential election. I think that they, with Biden, they went for the most experience. Of course, if it was most experience in the gubernatorial race, who knows who would win. But to your point, I think that is good. That is food for thought, because we got a lot of people running, and this is the tricky thing about a recall election. You have to fire the guy or woman and hire the new person on the same day, with no further discussion. I think that's very unwise, but that's how the system's set up. You said some Democrats are being talked out of running against Newsom. Can you give me some names?
Well, we all heard that Tom Steyer was. I still think Tom Steyer is looking, but we all heard that Tom Steyer was looking to run, and then there were a couple other names that were being floated around out there. I personally hope that someone like maybe a Tony Villaraigosa runs, maybe.
That's who I supported for governor in the first place. I know you're not a big fan of his, so I'm surprised to hear you say that you would want him to run.
I would, in this scenario, absolutely. I would support Villaraigosa in this scenario. I look at Gavin Newsom the same way I look at Eric Garcetti. I mean, I supported Eric Garcetti when he ran against Wendy Gruhl. Now, after 8 years of watching this man systematically support every policy possible to price black people out of the city boundaries of Los Angeles, I'm just completely through with him. And that, in addition to how he treated Black Lives Matter.
I mean, that's the thing for me. You call yourself a progressive, but you're calling the police on Black Lives Matter 80 times while they're protesting out. You lost me. Anyway, he's not on the ballot.
I'm already in discussion with my people in New Delhi. If he gets that ambassadorship, we're going to have to start a chapter over there in New Delhi. They think they escaping. Okay.
Well, do ambassadors go and live in the country? Is that what would happen? He'd go move to India? Wow.
Yes,
okay.
They go live in the country.
I'm always thinking they're here in Washington or something. Anyway.
Get on by. But that's how I look at Gavin Newsom, as someone who hasn't been too connected to the black community here. I'm not saying that we haven't benefited from some of the policies, but I can't point to for example, I am young enough to have known about for example, Jerry Brown's father, right? And even, of course, Jerry Brown, right? There are people who would argue that Jerry Brown, did stuff for black folks, right? And of course, for older people, they'll remember that, Mervyn Dimely, who was my mentor, was lieutenant governor under his father. I am hard pressed to think of a governor in recent history who really connected with black folks, right? When I look at Gavin Newsom, I see Eric Garcetti. I see these slick sort of, dudes that just say and do whatever. I mean, look, I was through already, but I was really through, Dominique, when that French Laundry story came out. That do as I say, not as I do idea, which I just did not think, was right. Am I willing to...
For those who missed it, she's talking about when Governor Gavin Newsom was out at a restaurant having a party for a friend.
Or lobbyist.
With a lobbyist.
Lobbyist.
Good point.
While
we were being told we couldn't go to restaurants by the governor. So a lot of people were angry about that. And French Laundry is the name of the restaurant. We do have some folks on the phone. Go ahead.
That's what actually fueled a lot of this, right? So it was the French Laundry incident. It was the school closures, right? It was, and let me be really clear. Like the Democrats think they're so slick. The Democrats think, and I can talk about the Democrats.
Republicans think they're pretty slick too.
I know, but I'm talking about the Democrats. They think they're so slick. So they decided to use the slogan, "Stop the Republican recall," because they think like if we hear the word Republican, we're going to get red in our eyes or something and just be like, ah.
But it really is a Republican recall. I mean, I know there are disgruntled Dems like you, but if you track the money,
disgruntled. I'm not disgruntled, Dominique.
Okay, dissatisfied, whatever you want to call it.
I am holding my party accountable.
Okay, that's fine. But if you look at the money, and I always like to follow the money, it's clearly a Republican. I mean, the top donor, John Kruger, $500,000. Orange County entrepreneur who supports charter schools and has donated mostly to Republican candidates. And it's interesting that Republicans brought this recall to bear. They started it with the help of some, far right-wing Proud Boy groups before the pandemic. But it really picked up steam during the pandemic because people were angry and are angry about school closures and restrictions on restaurants, having to wear masks. And a judge gave these fools extra time to get their signatures because of the pandemic, which I think is really foul.
I just think people who are mad about having to wear masks that save their lives is just crazy. But that's just me. You know what I'm saying?
Jeff Palmer, $200,000, Beverly Hills real estate developer who donated $5 million to support Trump's election. That's how the list looks. I mean, there's one couple that used to support Newsom, and I don't know what he did to make them mad. But most of these are big Republican donors that made this possible.
It's going to take more. As a strategist, I can tell you this. It's going to take more than saying stop the Republican recall to make sure that voters come out, particularly in our community, right? Because we're talking about a special election, right? Which elections, period, in California do not get high turnouts. Now, when you factor in that it's a special election, it's going to be even lower. So right. There has to be some incentive there. There has to be, and I'll be looking, Dominique, to see how much money is being spent in the black media on advertising.
Not to mention Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State, has already indicated that she's not going to be putting other stuff on this ballot. So other things that might inspire us to come out and vote won't be there.
Right. Yeah. So it's really going to be how much money is the Democratic Party going to put up to fight this recall, and where are they going to put that money? They traditionally do not put a lot of money into black consultants, black political consultants, black media.
Right.
Okay. But they want us to just come out there and, and again, take us for granted. Like I always tell people, they just want us to fall in line and go out there and do what they tell us to do. So it'll be really interesting because that's where what you said comes into play. It could actually go down where we do get one of those millions of people who have jumped, into this race because of low voter turnout.
Okay, well, we got some folks on the phones. I also want to point out, though, significant endorsements. California Republican Party donated $185,000 to the recall. Mike Huckabee, the former governor of Arkansas, is giving $100,000. And Newt Gingrich, this is definitely a Republican recall. I mean, I understand they're not the only ones voting for it, but it's definitely fueled by them. Without them, it doesn't happen.
I don't see red. I'm just saying every time I hear stop the Republican recall, it doesn't make me want to jump up and run out and get 10 of my best friends and say, girl, come on, we got to stop the Republican recall.
Got it. Okay, let's go to IROC calling us from Inglewood. Good morning, sir.
Inglewood?
It's actually a ma'am. Good morning.
Oh, good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, it's interesting how people assume I am a man because of my name.
Well, it's not a very typical name for a man or a woman, to be honest.
Okay.
So, nice meeting you, IROC.
Thank you. Thanks for the support of my name. So, I was curious for you to ask the community, us people, why do you think the governor's in the hot seat? What do you think he did or did not do that would make him be recalled? In my opinion, I thought that he was kind of for the people, but the way he speaks, he always reminds me of Obama, like his style of speaking. But I don't understand what could have caused him to be recalled, and this is shocking.
Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, what is your thought about why it's happening?
Look, I'm gonna be honest. I just kind of got into politics.
Okay.
Like
cool. Good for you.
Yeah, like especially after what you call it, our last president.
Oh yeah, good. Forget that name. You don't need to remember.
Yeah,
that.
What's his name?
Especially
after
he who shall not be named. Yes,
exactly. Especially after when he got elected, I really started taking it seriously. Not that I didn't take it before. It was always something that prevented me from voting, but I really made an effort to vote this year and did whatever I had to do.
Well, that's much appreciated. I think that's sort of one of the things that Jasmine and I were going back and forth about. Why did this happen? I think Ed Sanders explained it really well yesterday. He said this is the only way that Republicans can get a governor in California, because they are in the minority in the electorate. They're in the minority. They don't have any power in the state legislature. So this is a sneaky way for them to get into power. It's the last time we had a Republican governor is when they did this. There is some dissatisfaction among the regular people because of the pandemic, and Newsom made some mistakes, as Jasmine pointed out. That episode with him being out dining in the restaurant, I think some comments that have been tone deaf. I think every governor struggles under a pandemic, and that doesn't help. That's my opinion. And he's been targeted by Republicans, by the Proud Boys. What are your thoughts, Jasmine? Why is this recall even happening?
I think it's for all of those reasons. In addition, you have a lot of small business owners who were hurt really bad financially during the pandemic, during the worst of the pandemic. Because you have to remember that when all of this started and really picked up steam, things are really bad in California. Now, things are much, much better, which is something else that's also working against the Republicans, because by the time folks do get around to voting, the state will be fully reopened. Memories aren't that long, so I don't know how upset people will still be because they're not going to be on lockdown anymore. But people were upset because they were on lockdown. They were mad because their businesses were closed and they couldn't open their businesses. I can't tell you how many stories I listen to of usually white business owners who refuse to close their business, refuse to stop serving indoors. Like we're just, we're going to be defiant. We have to do this. So you had the business owners, you had the schools aspect. You'll hear Republicans and supporters of the recall say that there are a lot of parents who support it because they were frustrated and upset with the closure of the schools. To me, again, all of this is ridiculous because all of these things save lives. Okay, but granted, these are the things that piss these folks off, and I do agree with Ad. This is a sneaky way, and the only way, given the fact that this is a majority Democrat state, that Republicans could potentially get a governor in office. And remember, even if it did happen, it's not for a full 4 years. I think it's like for a year. I think Governor Newsom has a year left on his term. He's up for re-election himself,
that's why I think it's a huge waste of money. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Money that we don't have to waste right now as we recover from this pandemic.